Hi, I'm Daryl, and this is the story of how my family sold me into a marriage for $500,000. They said it was about legacy, about love, about doing what's best for the family. But behind the smiles and speeches, they used my name to cover their lies, to protect their assets, to fund their image. They even paid the woman I loved to walk away without a word. Then made me marry someone who wasn't just hiding secrets. She was faking her entire identity. I kept quiet for too long. I kept pretending it didn't hurt. But how do you breathe when every room in your own house is listening to you? When your own mother calls betrayal strategy? When your wedding photo is photoshopped because the real one never happened? How do you fight back when your own last name is the weapon being used against you? Would you have walked away, or would you have stayed and smiled for the camera too? The drive back to the old house always hit me the same way. A kind of quiet dread, like pulling off the highway into a part of myself I tried not to visit. Louisville had changed. New condos, coffee shops on corners that used to be gas stations. But the neighborhood I grew up in? Frozen in amber. The same cracked sidewalk, the same mailbox tilted like it had given up trying to stand straight. Mom's note had said, "Important family discussion. Please come." Formal, even for her. I parked in front of the house, already uneasy. The front porch still had that wicker bench with the peeling green paint, and the wind chime hanging under the awning rattled in the light breeze, too cheerful for what I suspected was coming. Inside, it was too quiet. My father, Clyde, was at the head of the dining table, posture too upright, his shirt buttoned all the way like he was interviewing someone. Mom, Marla, had that tight-lipped smile she used when pretending everything was normal. Silas wasn't there. Not surprising. He always had a way of vanishing when things got ugly. We wanted to talk about something transformative, Clyde started, folding his hands on the table like a CEO. I sat across from him, glancing at the documents already spread out. Spreadsheets, folders, printed emails. No hellos, no catching up. Marla leaned forward, sliding a document toward me. It was titled, "Projected Family Gains Through Drexler Alliance." "We've been speaking with the Drexlers," she said softly, as if she were delivering good news. Ilona Drexler, their daughter. You'd remember her if you ever paid attention during community fundraisers. I looked at the page. Ilona was 35, paralyzed from the waist down due to a car accident a few years ago. Her family owned a chain of assisted living facilities and had deep political ties. But none of that was what made my stomach churn. "We want you to marry her," Clyde said plainly. I blinked. No preface, no sugarcoating. "You're serious," I muttered, scanning the spreadsheet again. My name wasn't labeled as groom or fiancé. It said subject. Marla offered a chuckle that didn't reach her eyes. "It's a strategic alignment. They're offering investment, board seats, real estate opportunities. You marrying Ilona solidifies trust." I stopped myself. I didn't want to say it. "We know about her condition," Marla cut in. "She's brilliant, educated. You'll be respected. And let's be honest, Daryl, your dating history hasn't exactly screamed stability." That was a dig at Verena. I felt my jaw tighten. "You're asking me to give up my life for a business merger," I said. "We're giving you a future," Clyde said, as if correcting a child. "It's time you stepped up." They looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. I didn't respond. I stood and left. The next evening I found myself in the Drexlers' home, another formality I had no say in. Ilona's father, Grant, greeted me with a politician's warmth. Ilona was in the corner of the sitting room, poised in her wheelchair, composed but distant. Her dress was elegant, navy, blue, modest neckline. She said hello, voice calm, polite, detached. We made small talk, weather, traffic, a few books. Grant excused himself to get wine. As he left the study door ajar, I noticed papers stacked on his desk. One was a scoring sheet with boxes checked in ink. At the top, it read, Emotional Compliance Evaluation. My name was there. A number circled next to it, 710. I stared a beat too long before Ilona turned to look. She must have caught me reading something I wasn't supposed to. But she didn't say anything. Just gave a tight smile. That drive home was one of the loneliest I've had in years. I didn't turn on music, didn't open the windows. I just kept hearing that number, 7 out of 10, like I was a product being rated for delivery. I pulled into my driveway, headlights reflecting off my own front porch. I didn't get out of the car right away. Instead, I opened my bag, pulled out the spreadsheet Mom had handed me. It was creased from my grip. I smoothed it across the dashboard. My name, subject, still sat in bold letters across the top. I read the projections again. The estimated return on investment after 2 years of marriage. The timeline for property transition. The bullet points under behavioral expectations. No mention of love, or happiness, or choice. I couldn't stop staring at that spreadsheet, like it was my obituary in Excel format. There was my face on the envelope, and yet I had no memory of that smile. It was a glossy photo, printed without a crease, of me and Ilona, dressed in wedding formal, standing beneath a wooden arch lined with magnolias. My hands rested on hers, like we were the very image of partnership. But I never posed for that picture. I never even wore that exact tie. I tossed the envelope on the passenger seat, more confused than angry, and drove toward the cafe where Verena had agreed, reluctantly, to meet me. She was already there when I arrived. Back corner, facing the window, arms crossed over her chest like she wanted to form a barrier between herself and the world. Or maybe just from me. I sat across from her, unsure if I should smile or apologize first. She didn't waste time. I think it's better if we don't talk anymore, she said, her eyes darting to the door, as if expecting someone to barge in and clap for the performance. I waited. Is that it? I just can't do this, she said, softer now. I need to let you go. You're not saying why. She didn't. I nodded. What else was there to do? I wasn't about to beg. I knew her too well, and I knew this wasn't coming from her. We didn't even finish the drinks. I walked her to her car, opened her door out of old habit, and stood there as she drove off without another word. Back in my truck, I saw something folded on the passenger seat. It was her handwriting. One sentence. You deserve better. Goodbye. That note said everything her mouth wouldn't. When I got home, the silence was already waiting for me. I stepped into the kitchen where Marla was arranging a cheese board, of all things, like we had guests coming. She didn't ask where I'd been. Didn't mention Verena once. Clyde was in the den, watching reruns, feet up, drinking something amber and expensive enough to sting. I wanted someone, anyone, to say something. A sorry, even a lie. But they treated Verena like she had never existed, like they had snipped her out of my timeline and expected me to move on like a well-trained dog. Later that night, long after the dishes were done and the house had quieted into its usual stillness, I stepped out to the porch for air. Through the cracked kitchen window, I heard Marla on the phone. No, Silas already said no. Yes, Dariel's easier to push. He always has been. I froze. The words slid in like a cold knife. Not deep, but exactly where it hurt. I didn't move until the call ended. The next day I found Silas in the garage, elbow deep in the hood of Mom's old Buick. I leaned on the door frame, waited for him to say something first. He didn't. So I said, "They asked you to marry Ilona first." He glanced up, eyes heavy. Yeah. Why didn't you tell me? I thought they'd drop it when I said no. But they didn't. They just moved to me. He didn't argue, just wiped his hands on a rag and nodded. That admission shouldn't have surprised me. But somehow it cracked something loose. I left the garage and drove aimlessly until I found myself at Cherokee Park. The sun was just beginning to fall behind the trees, painting the walking trail in orange. I sat on a bench and watched couples stroll past, joggers bouncing to music, a father pushing his daughter on a swing. I used to think being the second choice was better than being no choice at all. Now, I wasn't sure. My mind wandered back to childhood. Silas had always been the golden one. Honor roll, varsity football, the first to move out, first to buy a house. And me? I was the leftover effort. The one they called when Plan A failed. The one who never said no. And now I was the one marrying a woman who rated me 7 out of 10 for emotional compliance. On my way home, I stopped by the mailbox and pulled out a small parcel. The handwriting on the front was Marla's. Inside was a printed wedding announcement, complete with that fake photo, me and Ilona smiling beneath those damn magnolias. There was even a return envelope labeled "Thank You Notes." All blank. There was my face on the envelope, and yet I had no memory of that smile. Even when I looked away, I could still see that smile, the one I never gave. The morning of the ceremony crept in like fog. I sat in the parking lot outside the venue, fingers clenched on the steering wheel, watching white-gloved staff scurry between rows of neatly parked cars. The building looked like it had been pulled from a wedding magazine. Arched doorways, stone courtyard, pale roses woven into every banister. It was someone else's dream, not mine. Inside, everything was already set. I was handed a boutonniere I didn't ask for and ushered toward a waiting room with a fake fireplace and bottled water lined up like soldiers. No groomsmen, no best man. Just me in a suit someone else tailored, in a room someone else decorated, waiting for a life someone else planned. When the doors opened, I walked down the aisle alone. Ilona was already at the altar, seated in a custom wheelchair that gleamed under the lights like a prop from a tech showcase. Her dress was flawless, her hair tucked into an elegant chignon. She didn't look at me, just forward. Her father stood beside her like a politician posing for re-election. The officiant began. No welcome, no introduction, no name, just the groom. I waited for someone to object, maybe even for myself to speak up. But silence has a gravity all its own. I said, I do, like I was repeating lines in a poorly written play. There was no toast from my side, no speech from anyone who knew me. Instead, a slideshow played on the reception wall. Family moments, growing up Knox. Every photo of me was from childhood. Me in overalls at 6, me holding a fishing rod at 10. Nothing recent, no Verena, no college, no adult Daryl. It was like I'd vanished after puberty. 2 days later, an envelope arrived. No return address, just a glossy label. For the happy couple. Inside was a photo, our wedding, supposedly. Ilona and I beneath the arch, hands clasped, beaming. But something was off. I'd never seen that exact background. The smile was mine, but not. The tie was the wrong color. The lighting was wrong. I tilted the photo toward the window. The shadows didn't match. The hand on her lap wasn't mine. I don't wear a watch. It wasn't a real photo. They had taken my face and pasted it onto a better version of me. That evening, I drove to Silas's place. No warning. Just showed up, holding the fake picture like evidence from a crime scene. He answered the door in a t-shirt and gym shorts. No surprise on his face. We didn't talk much at first. He poured bourbon into 2 chipped glasses, handed me one without a word. We sat on his porch, cicadas buzzing in the trees. After a long silence, I said, "They photoshopped me into my own wedding." He sipped. "I figured." I turned. "You figured?" He didn't look at me. "You know this wasn't meant to be yours." I waited for him to explain. He didn't. The rest of the drink went down bitter. I left the picture on his table and walked out without saying goodbye. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, lights off, blinds half drawn. The fake photo lay in front of me, mocking. I stared until the colors blurred. Then I stood, shredded it slowly, and flushed the pieces. In the hallway, unopened wedding gifts were stacked like tombstones. Crystal, silver, boxed linens, all from people who hadn't bothered to call. I started moving them, one by one, into the storage closet. No rage, just cold purpose. When I shut the door on the last box, I stood for a moment in the darkened hallway, letting the silence settle. Even when I looked away, I could still see that smile, the one I never gave. If she was watching me this whole time, what else had she already seen? That question buzzed like a hornet in the back of my mind, even as the days blurred into one another. I tried to pretend things were normal. I cooked breakfast, checked the mail, went to work, came home. We had dinners that felt like staged reenactments. Ilona would ask me how my day was, nod politely, then offer a thought about a client or a book she was reading. On paper, we looked like a functioning couple. But it didn't feel real. And worse, it felt rehearsed. She knew too much. Too many details that didn't make sense. One evening, after I had picked up a sandwich from a shop I hadn't been to in months, Ilona casually commented, "I hope you didn't get mustard. Your stomach always reacts badly to it." I blinked. I'd never told her that. Never once brought it up. Not even with Verena. At first I brushed it off. Coincidence, maybe. But the list grew longer. She always seemed to know when I'd had a second coffee, when I skipped lunch, when I drove through a different part of town for work, even though I hadn't said a word. One Saturday, I decided to fix the hallway thermostat. It had been blinking for days. As I removed the outer casing and ran my hand behind the panel to check the wiring, I felt something strange. Another cable, thinner, tucked deep behind the wallboard. Curious, I followed it to a nearby closet we barely used. Behind a stack of boxes and an old vacuum, there was a panel screwed shut and painted over. It didn't belong. The edges were newer, sharper. I got a screwdriver. What I found behind that panel stopped me cold. A modem, a hard drive, and a small, dusty screen tucked against the back wall, displaying real-time footage from 4 different rooms in the house. I stared at it for a long time. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, hallway, all of them active, all of them recent. No bathroom, thankfully, but everything else was visible. The kitchen camera had time-stamp overlays. I watched a loop of myself just yesterday, walking in with groceries and placing my keys on the counter. There was no sound, just image. It was enough. I didn't scream, didn't call her name, didn't unplug the system. I closed the closet and walked out calmly, every breath slower than the last. That night, I lay awake, replaying everything since the day I met Ilona. Every interaction, every moment she guessed something right. Every time she asked me a question where she already knew the answer. The next morning, I lost my phone. It took less than 5 minutes to find it wedged between the passenger seat and the center console of my truck. But what I hadn't seen before was the tiny black object attached beneath the seat. A second GPS tracker. I peeled it off and drove to a gas station on the edge of town. In the parking lot, I used my spare tablet to access the link I'd found in the car's backup folder. The tracker synced immediately, revealing a detailed map of my past month's movement. Color-coded. Time-stamped. Everything I'd done, everywhere I'd been, even the time I stopped by the park for 10 minutes to clear my head. One trip was marked in red, a grocery run. Ilona had mentioned I was 9 minutes later than usual that day. I hadn't thought anything of it. Until now. I went home, changed clothes, and drove straight to a department store. Bought a burner phone. Left it in my desk drawer at work. Bought a second one the next day. Started writing my thoughts on paper. Pages I folded and hid beneath the floorboard in the guest room. I changed the password on my laptop. Erased old backup logs. Removed my cloud sync. At home, I said nothing. She made soup that night. Asked me about my co-workers. Talked about an upcoming documentary on disability and identity. She was polished, pleasant, perfect. I nodded, smiled, and sat in silence. Because now I knew what I was dealing with. Not a wife, not a partner, something else entirely. That night, I sat in the garage with the door slightly cracked, watching the dusk settle. I didn't touch my tools or start the car. I just whispered to the dark, "Now I know what you're afraid of." I didn't know how yet, but I was going to burn the script they wrote for me. The message came through late, around 10:20 p.m., just as I was locking up the tool shed behind the house. It was short, no name, no explanation, just a line of text glowing on my screen. "Meet me at Quarry Lane. You'll want to hear this." I stared at it for a moment, heart thudding. I hadn't heard that name, Quarry Lane, in years, not since high school. It was a wide dirt shoulder off Route 17, with an overlook that dipped into limestone walls and echoing quiet. People used to sneak there to drink, talk, disappear. It wasn't a place you went without purpose. I almost didn't go. But something in my gut twisted when I read it again. 15 minutes later, headlights from my truck bounced along the gravel path. A single sedan sat under the trees. Engine off. No movement. Then I saw her. Verena. She looked the same and yet not. Her hair was shorter now, chin length and windswept, and she wore a denim jacket zipped halfway up. She didn't get out, just nodded for me to slide into the passenger seat. The moment I sat down, she said it. "Your mother offered me 50 grand to leave you." I didn't speak, just watched her, my throat a knot. She swallowed. "It wasn't just money. She told me if I stayed, I'd only be a liability to your career, your family's reputation. That Ilona was a better fit. I'd just drag you down." "And you said yes," I said. Not a question, just air. Her voice cracked. "I didn't know what else to do. You were so close with them back then. And I thought if I stepped back, they'd stop pushing so hard." Silence pooled between us, the kind that swallows sound and time alike. "You were never the problem," I said finally. "They were just looking for a pawn." She looked away, blinking fast. "There's more." Of course there was. A physical therapist came into the clinic last week. He used to work with Ilona at a center upstate. Said she made great progress, was even taking assisted steps. Then one day she told them she didn't want to continue. Claimed being able to walk would complicate things. My hands curled into fists against my jeans. "She didn't want to walk?" I repeated slowly. "She didn't want to change the story," Verena said. "He said she was sharper than most patients he'd met, knew exactly what she wanted from the start." I sat back in the seat, exhaled hard. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. I thanked her, not for the betrayal, but for telling me, for confirming what I already suspected but didn't want to admit. We drove back into town in separate cars. When I got home, I didn't take my coat off. I marched straight into my parents' house and found Marla in the kitchen, icing a cake like it was any other Tuesday. "You really offered her money to vanish?" I asked, not even raising my voice. She didn't flinch. I did what was necessary. Verena was delicate. Delicate? I laughed once. Bitter. She was the only person in this family who ever told me the truth. You're being emotional, she said. This is why we made the decision for you. Ilona is stable. She's smart. She has backing. She knows how to play the long game. And me? I asked. What am I? The prize in a silent auction? Clyde strolled in from the hallway with a drink. It's not personal, son. It's business. You were always the flexible one. Silas said no. We knew you'd do what was right. I turned toward my brother's old room, found Silas leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. You knew? I asked. He didn't speak, just held my gaze and nodded once. That was the moment something broke for good. I walked out without another word, the sound of Marla's mixer buzzing behind me like static. Back in my truck, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. My breath was shallow. Rage didn't feel sharp anymore. It felt heavy. A knock on my window startled me. Verena stood there, hand resting lightly on the glass. I rolled it down. She didn't say anything, just reached in and rested her hand over mine. Warm. Steady. This isn't about revenge, she whispered. It's about reclaiming your life. I looked at her, really looked, and nodded. I want out, I said, voice lower than I expected. And this time I decide how. If she could stand that whole time, what else was she capable of doing while I slept? That question carved a hollow in my gut. It echoed every time I passed her in the hallway, every time I sat across from her at dinner and watched her cut food with steady hands, arms moving with practiced ease. I'd see her reach for a salt shaker or turn in her chair to grab the remote, and now I couldn't unsee it. Not the motion itself, but the control, the confidence. It didn't fit the story she sold everyone. It didn't fit the way she played victim in front of the neighbors or whispered about how she missed walking in the autumn leaves. All of it, a performance, and I had applauded like a fool. The next day, I started digging. I waited until she was out. Book club, or something that sounded harmless enough. She had left in a car sent by her father's driver, wheels gliding like a queen off to court. I gave it 15 minutes, then logged into the old laptop we used for bills. I accessed the Drexler Family Trust site through a back door she probably didn't even know I remembered. And there it was, filed 3 months before our wedding. A legal amendment granting Ilona sole guardianship over 2 parcels of family land and an investment account worth nearly 7 figures. It had been in her name for almost a year. No mention of a co-trustee. No clause about marriage nullifying her control. The whole marriage? It was the paperwork, the optics, the final layer of legitimacy. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I clicked print calmly and walked into the garage to retrieve the manila file I had started weeks ago. It already had printouts of emails, screen captures, and notes I'd written about her patterns. What she ate, how she tracked me, the lies about therapy. That night, as I was hauling out the trash bins, the neighbor across the street waved me over. She was watering her porch plants, plastic flamingos tucked in beside the bushes. "How's Ilona?" she asked. I forced a smile. "She's all right." "She's still walking okay?" she said casually, pulling a weed from the flower bed. I paused. "Excuse me?" She looked up, confused. "I saw her late the other night. I think she was closing the garage, standing. Didn't want to startle her, so I didn't say anything." My heart stuttered. "Couldn't have been her," I said quickly. "Maybe you saw me." "Nope," she replied with a soft chuckle. She waved at me. I nodded, then muttered something about getting back to the trash. Walked away without looking back. Inside, I locked the bedroom door and opened the security footage archive. The camera facing the kitchen had been running on a loop. I rewound to 3 nights ago, around the time I remembered hearing movement but assuming it was the cat. And there it was. Ilona rolled into the kitchen, checked her phone, poured herself a glass of water, then glanced toward the cabinet above the fridge, the one I couldn't reach without a step stool. She stood, not shakily, not clumsily, with perfect balance, reached up, grabbed a bottle and sat back down, like it was nothing. I sat back in the desk chair, breath caught in my throat. She lied to everyone. The next day, I couldn't think straight. I went through the motions, showered, dressed, went to work. My hands shook typing emails. I smiled at coworkers and didn't hear a word they said. I left early. Back home, I pulled out the folder. It was thick now, layered with printouts, photos, screenshots, sticky notes of quotes and questions. I started labeling them by date. Patterns emerged. Her days out matched sudden spikes in our accounts. Her conversations mirrored events I hadn't even told her about yet. I stopped using our shared calendar. I shut off my phone's location settings. I bought a burner flip phone from the gas station, paid in cash, activated it under a fake name. I used a notebook now, too. No cloud, no backup. Just pages of my handwriting. Things I didn't want anyone else to edit. The last thing I did that night was slide open the bottom drawer of my desk. It had a label taped years ago when I moved in. Exit plan. Back then it held emergency cash, a second set of keys, and a copy of my passport. Just in case. Now it held something else. The beginning of a timeline. Proof. Patterns. A manila folder filled not with panic, but with strategy. And as I closed the drawer, I looked around the quiet house. The lights dimmed. The silence deepened. The walls didn't move, but I could feel them watching. The next time I smiled in public, I knew I'd be holding a loaded truth. The drive to my parents' house felt colder than usual, even with the windows rolled up. The late autumn wind pressed against the glass like it wanted in. I kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles white, breath slow, rehearsing the same question over and over like a mantra. Did you take money before the wedding? I didn't announce my arrival, just walked through the door I'd walked through 1,000 times before. Marla was in the kitchen, apron on, sifting flour into a mixing bowl like this was just another Sunday. Clyde was in the living room, planted in his chair, eyes locked on a football game, mouth chewing like a cow, remote in hand. Did you take money before the wedding? I asked. No hello, no build-up. Marla didn't flinch. She kept stirring, didn't even glance up. Clyde, on the other hand, muted the TV and leaned back in his recliner like he'd been waiting for this moment. We had to secure the deal, he said flatly. You wouldn't have understood it then. Secure the deal? I repeated. You sold your son like a car lease. Marla wiped her hands on a towel. It wasn't personal, Daryl. It was necessary. Your future was never really about you. The room buzzed in my ears. I stepped back, chest tight. Just say it, I said. Say it out loud. You took a payout. Clyde shrugged. It wasn't cash in a briefcase, if that's what you're picturing. It was a stake, a position. We bought into something permanent. And you used me as collateral. Neither of them denied it. That night I drove home without the radio on. I didn't want distraction. I wanted silence to scream into. I pulled Silas's old laptop out of a storage bin in the garage, dusted it off, and booted it up. The password was still the same. I wasn't looking for much, just a contract I remembered signing years ago when our family reorganized some assets. But what I found instead was in a deleted folder labeled MISC. Inside were screenshots of texts between Ilona and Marla. Once it's finalized, we'll split it. Just keep him quiet. Another. He won't ask questions. He's too busy surviving. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. My mother and wife had conspired in plain language, like I was a tool, not a person. I copied every file onto a USB drive and slipped it into my wallet. The next morning, I met Verena at a park we used to walk in during college, back before any of this began. She waited by the pond, coat wrapped tight, gloves on, steam rising from her coffee. "I have something," I said, handing her the USB. She scrolled through the images, eyes hardening with each click. "You could go to court with this." "Not yet. I'm not ready for public fire," I said. "But I want to build the file." She nodded slowly. "I know someone, an investigative lawyer, not a loudmouth. He plays the long game." I nodded back. "We document," she said. "We wait. We strike when it counts." Later that evening, I returned home. The house was dim, quiet. I walked past the wedding portrait hanging in the hallway, Ilona and I smiling beneath the arch. The frame was ornate, heavy, a gift from her father. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I lifted it gently off the nail, walked to the kitchen, slid the photo from the frame. I didn't smash it. That would have been satisfying, but sloppy. Instead, I sat at the table, pulled out the shredder, and fed the image through in slow, even strips. The frame went back on the wall, empty. I took the USB and drove to a bank 20 minutes out of town, opened a new safety deposit box under the name Darren Quinn, my grandfather's middle name and my high school alias when I played pranks on teachers. When I slid the USB inside and heard the click of the metal drawer, something in me shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was preparing. But even in victory, the real wound was waiting back home. The envelope was heavy, thicker than any family event invitation I'd received before. Embossed lettering, gold trim, my name printed in an elegant serif font like I was being summoned to royalty. Inside, a card, Knox Family Legacy Brunch, celebrating generations of community values, hosted by Clyde and Marla, press and partners in attendance, formal dress required. They always did love a show. I RSVP'd without hesitation. Not because I cared to play along, but because I was ready to flip the script. The folder marked Truth went into my bag that morning. A flash drive too, loaded with screenshots, legal docs, audio clips, no rehearsal. Just timing. The brunch was held in a renovated country club ballroom, glass chandeliers and white tablecloths everywhere. The room buzzed with forced laughter, old money, and too much cologne. Marla wore lavender. Clyde sported a navy jacket and smug smile. They greeted me like nothing had happened, arms outstretched, cheeks taut with fake warmth. "We're so glad you made it," Marla purred. "It means everything to the family." She meant it to look united. I meant to break it. I took a seat near the back, biding my time while mimosas were poured and a string quartet played something cheerful. Midway through the event, Marla rose to the microphone. She beamed. "Family is legacy," she said. "It's the thread that runs through generations, binding us with loyalty, honor, and love. And no one represents that better than our son, Daryl." My name echoed across the room like a dare. Clyde clapped first, and others followed. A few faces I didn't recognize turned toward me with polite smiles. "And with that," Marla continued, "we'd love to have Daryl say a few words." I didn't hesitate. I stood, walked to the podium, adjusted the mic. "Thank you, Mom, Dad, everyone here." I pulled the small remote from my pocket and clicked. The projector behind me flickered. First slide, a scan of the marriage contract. Zoomed in on one clause, Minimum cohabitation period, 24 months. Non-compliance forfeits trust access. Murmurs began. Click. Next slide, a screenshot of a text from Marla to Ilona. Once it's finalized, we'll split it. Just keep him quiet. Another. He's not a problem. He's obedient. Gasps now. One woman whispered, "Oh my God." I looked up, voice steady. This wasn't a marriage, it was a merger, and I was the asset. Clyde stood, trying to wave it off. "That's not real, he's spinning things." I held up a folder. "These are notarized originals. Would anyone like to verify?" Silence. Then Silas stood. "It's real," he said, loud, clear. "I saw it 2 years ago. I didn't stop it. I should have." The room turned. People leaned away from Clyde. A reporter I didn't know held up her phone, recording. I stepped back from the mic. "This isn't my family anymore," I said. "My name may be Knox, but my legacy begins today." No one moved. No one dared speak. I walked out, the sound of cameras flashing behind me. I thought I'd closed the book, but Ilona hadn't finished her last chapter. When I stepped back into the house after the brunch, I didn't expect balloons or broken glass. I expected silence. I expected an empty kitchen, maybe the TV droning in the background. But there she was. Ilona, already seated at the dining table, hands folded, her posture pristine, her expression unreadable. "You weren't supposed to be smart about this," she said, not even offering a hello. I stood there, my coat still half on, breath barely caught from the event I'd just detonated. "So it's all true?" She didn't flinch. "You tell me." Her calm was a dare. I dropped my keys on the counter, walked toward the staircase, toward the bedroom. "Are you leaving me?" she asked. I didn't answer. I went to the closet, pulled out the same battered suitcase I'd used during college, tossed in clothes, chargers, a pair of boots. No rhythm to it, just motion. The house was too quiet again, like it had been scrubbed clean of its secrets, but they clung to the walls anyway. A few minutes later, she appeared in the doorway, holding a folder. The front read, in her handwriting, "In case you ever cared." I should have tossed it back. But I took it. Inside, tax documents, digital contracts, board approval letters, all signed in my name, all tied to a non-profit foundation bearing my face, my words, my mission. Except I had never started it, never approved it, never even knew it existed. "You created a fake charity under my name?" I asked, my voice cracking in its own disbelief. "I created a vehicle," she replied coolly, "for something better. Your name opened doors. Why let that go to waste?" "Laundering." "Reframing." Her eyes didn't twitch. Her voice was smooth like glass, cold, polished, dangerous. I shoved the folder into my bag. No words left. Later that evening, the internet woke up. A former classmate, someone I didn't know, had posted a thread that started with, "Does anyone remember Ilona Drexler at Briarwood? Because I don't." Within an hour, alumni chimed in. Professors tagged. Someone unearthed a screenshot. Briarwood's master's program in cognitive therapy had been shut down 5 years ago. No records of her ever being enrolled. Social media was a storm. Her credentials began to unravel like a sweater pulled from the wrong end. Endorsements vanished. Public boards removed her from their rosters. The woman who built her image on resilience and grace now looked like a ghost of someone who never was. I walked the halls of our house like it was a museum of lies. The framed degrees, the smiling headshots, all props now, all carefully placed. And suddenly, none of them held weight. Sometime past midnight, I realized I hadn't seen or heard Ilona for hours. I checked the master bedroom. Empty. Kitchen. Quiet. Back patio. Lights off. The only clue was in the garage. Her wheelchair was parked slightly crooked, angled like she'd wheeled in fast, then stood, yes, stood, and walked away, But where? My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Kentucky area code. Mr. Knox? The voice was firm, professional. This is Officer Reddick. We need you to come down to the station. It's about Ilona Drexler. But survival wasn't closure, and I still had to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The station buzzed with fluorescent light and the low hum of printers. A young officer offered me water I didn't take. I sat across from two detectives, neither overly warm nor hostile, just alert, like they'd seen every flavor of crazy in this city and were waiting to learn which one I was. We found her outside an abandoned service station off I-65, one of them said. She said she was fleeing abuse, claimed her husband was manipulating her, that he'd stolen her identity. I blinked. That's bold. They slid a manila envelope across the table. We've heard both sides before. What we need now is your documentation. I handed them the USB. Start with the contract and the texts between her and my mother. They plugged it in without comment. The screen lit up with time-stamped folders. Marriage contract, fake charity, surveillance logs. One clicked open, and silence filled the room. 10 minutes later, they thanked me for my cooperation. By morning, the charges were filed. Ilona Drexler, identity fraud, misappropriation of non-profit funds, and forgery of official documentation. Local news ran the headlines first. Then, national outlets picked it up. A journalist leaked the affidavit to social media, and within hours, she became a trending cautionary tale. Clyde and Marla, of course, issued a statement. We are devastated to learn of our daughter-in-law's betrayal. We had no knowledge of her schemes and are cooperating fully with authorities. I watched their press conference on mute, sitting at the edge of my bed. Marla looked directly into the camera with just enough moisture in her eyes. Clyde folded his hands like a Sunday deacon. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Later that day, I stopped by Silas's house. He answered the door in sweats and a hoodie, beard patchy, eyes shadowed. I know why you're here, he said, stepping aside. We didn't sit in the living room. He led me to the attic. There, in an old file box marked Fam Docs, he pulled out a folder. These were the prenup drafts Mom made Ilona sign before they switched it to that 24-month clause crap. And this, he said, handing me a packet of emails, is early correspondence between them, before they even told you about the wedding. I sat on a dusty stool and read in silence. He leaned on the railing, not saying a word. After a while, he whispered, I thought protecting the family meant protecting its image. It doesn't, I said. It never did. He nodded, eyes fixed on nothing. I took the box and left. The days that followed were quiet. There was no big showdown, no final scream from Ilona in a courtroom, just process. I filed the divorce paperwork. The same lawyer who helped file my identity protection claims submitted the dissolution forms. Ilona's team didn't contest. They couldn't afford to. Legally, her credibility had already been reduced to ash. Verena came by one afternoon to help me sort through my tax filings. She brought soup, didn't ask how I was feeling, just laid out folders and got to work. Her presence was steady, her words minimal. We didn't talk about what we were, only what needed to be done. At one point, she passed me a headline on her phone. Southern Black Widow, it read, above a grainy photo of Ilona from the charity gala last year. Verena raised an eyebrow. I snorted. I'm just glad I'm still here to laugh. She smiled, small and soft, then went back to sorting receipts. And for a moment, in the quiet tap of paper clips and keystrokes, I felt something I hadn't in months. Relief. I wasn't rebuilding a life. I was building one I'd never been allowed to imagine. The house was still. No echo of her wheelchair over the hardwood. No scent of her perfume. trailing from the hallway. It felt hollow, but not haunting. Just paused. I started in the kitchen. Her color-coded spice rack, her collection of copper utensils, all boxed and labeled. Not out of spite, just necessity. The drawer of chargers, random notes, and stray pens followed. Then the closet. 1 box became 2, then 5. I didn't read her journals, didn't flip through old receipts or lipstick-stained napkins from whatever designer luncheon she last attended. Some things don't need closure. They just need space. I sealed the last box with packing tape and wrote a date on top. Not for memory, but so I'd know when I stopped carrying it. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch, hands dusty, shirt damp. The sun had that soft, amber glow that came with fall in Kentucky. Quiet. Still. Verena arrived without knocking. She held a manila envelope in one hand and a small thermos in the other. "Signed court copies," she said, handing over the paperwork. We didn't hug, just sat. 2 mugs, 1 steeped silence. "You don't have to be anyone's son," she said after a while. "Or husband. You just have to be you." It hit me like a hand to the chest, not out of sadness, out of relief. I broke. Tears came, not because I missed Ilona, not because I wished things were different, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen without being used. Verena didn't touch me. She didn't say it was okay. She just waited. And then, she stood. "I'll leave you to it," she said. As she walked back toward her car, I whispered, "Thank you." She didn't look back, but she lifted one hand in acknowledgement before she drove off. That night, just after dusk, a knock landed on my door. I opened it and found Marla standing there with a pie. She smiled, tight and careful. "Pumpkin, your favorite." I didn't respond. She stepped in as if she still had permission. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said. "Clyde pushed it. Ilona, she had her ways." I leaned against the counter, arms folded, waiting. "You have to believe me," she went on, her voice thin. "We were doing what families do, securing the future." I nodded slowly. "You raised a man strong enough to walk away," I said. Her face flickered, pain or pride, I couldn't tell. She placed the pie on the counter, unsure what to do with her hands. When she left, I carried the pie outside and dropped it straight into the trash bin. No ceremony. No final words. The next morning I signed the lease. The office space was small. 2 rooms, one with a window. The air still smelled of fresh paint and laminate glue. The new sign would arrive in a week. The Quiet Exit Project. A non-profit focused on helping men stuck in controlling or abusive marriages. Financial help, legal counsel, emotional grounding, a way out, without spectacle. The walls were still bare, but I already saw the color scheme in my head. Blues, grays, not cold, just calm. I set down my keys, rolled up my sleeves, and plugged in the router. There isn't one, and for the first time, I get to choose that. The courtroom was cool and impersonal. Fluorescent lights hummed above. A bailiff adjusted his belt. The judge, an older man with thinning hair and weary eyes, called the room to order. Ilona sat at the defense table, hands clasped, her expression unreadable. Her attorney whispered something in her ear. She didn't respond. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. "Ilona Drexler," the judge read. "This court finds you guilty of identity fraud, falsification of legal documents, and misuse of non-profit status." His tone was devoid of emotion, just the weight of fact. "You knowingly constructed a false identity and manipulated others for financial gain. You will serve 3 years in a correctional facility, with 2 years probation upon release. Restitution is ordered." A gasp came from someone in the back. Maybe media. Maybe just someone shocked she didn't get away with it. Ilona turned slightly, trying to catch my eye. I didn't give it. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked if I had a statement. I shook my head, then paused. Closure doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with a sentence. I walked away. That afternoon, I stood at the city clerk's office. The form was simple. Name change petition. Reason? Personal transformation. I dropped Knox, took my grandmother's maiden name instead, Dariel Mercer. She'd been the only person who ever told me truth wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. When I stepped out into the light, holding the new ID, a journalist shouted, "Why the change?" I held up the card. That name bought a legacy of silence. I'm not carrying it into my future. The next morning, I wrote a letter. To the boy I used to be, it began. You thought silence made you strong. It didn't. Truth did. They called it loyalty. It was manipulation. You tried so hard to belong, you forgot you already did. I folded it gently, sealed the envelope, and labeled it Closed Chapters. Then slid it into the drawer next to my desk at the Quiet Exit Project office. By noon, the first 5 clients had arrived. Men of all ages. One held a folder so tight his knuckles were white. Another avoided eye contact, like speaking his name out loud might shatter something inside him. I welcomed them in. We sat in a circle. I didn't open with my name. I opened with this. I was someone else for a long time. But then I told the truth. And the truth told me who I was. I shared what I could. Not names, not details, just the facts that mattered. One man, early 40s, face drawn, asked, "Did you forgive them?" I thought for a second. "No," I said. "But I stopped giving them power over who I become." Outside, the sun was rising slow but firm, a clean sky over Kentucky. I stepped out with my briefcase, the keys to a story I now owned, not inherited. Sometimes, we don't realize how much of ourselves we've traded away until we finally sit in silence and feel the space that used to be filled by noise, control, and manipulation. I spent years thinking strength meant staying quiet, being the good son, the patient husband, the man who endured. But real strength? Real strength was walking away from a story that was never mine to begin with. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt invisible in your own life, like you're living someone else's script, know this. It's never too late to step into your truth. You don't need anyone's permission to reclaim your name, your voice, or your future. You are allowed to start over, not from scratch, but from experience. I share this story not for sympathy, but for connection, because I know I'm not alone. Maybe you're watching this right now from a quiet room, trying to decide if your story matters. It does. You do. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from something that defined you for too long? What did you learn? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If this video touched you, type 1 in the comments or share your own moment of reclaiming. If you didn't like it, I still want to hear why. This is a space for real stories and honest voices. And if you'd like to join us for more true stories like this, raw, human, and deeply felt, don't forget to subscribe. If you found this video scrolling late at night or sitting in your car during lunch, maybe it was meant for you. Subscribe now and come along for the next chapter.